There are quite a few enemies in Breath of the Wild that are extremely rare and hard to find. The following list will include some Overlord bosses, but will not include dungeon bosses, as they are only available one time. Different traps will also not be included, only actual physical enemies. So the first one is a Stalnox, which are hard to find and easy to miss in Breath of the Wild. While there are quite a few Hinox spread across the landscape of The Legends of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the Stalnox is a little harder to find. Stalnox are the skeletal versions of the Hinox and only comes out in the dark. Players may even stumble upon a Stalnox during the day without even knowing it is there. One of the few Stalnox in the game is in a Hyrule Castle guarding Breath of the Wild, unfortunately breakable Hylian shield. Breath of the Wild, Igneo and Frost Talus can only be found in certain places, which makes them the next really rare characters in the game. The Talus in general is more rare enemy in Breath of the Wild, however, some can only be found in certain locations. Talus are hard to notice until Link is particularly standing on the top of them, and there are actually 8 different types of Talus in the game. The Igneo Talus and the Frost Talus, however, can only be found near the Death Mountain and the Gerudo Highlands and Hebra Mountains respectively. They tend to blend into their environment very well and can be a tough enemy to beat if Link doesn't have the right weapon. This is especially a concern since Breath of the Wild's weapon have limited durability. Next one are Wizzrobes, which are common in Breath of the Wild unless they are a certain type. Wizzrobes in The Legends of Zelda Breath of the Wild can be found fairly easily. There are 3 types of Wizzrobes that are significantly rarer than the others. The Fire Wizzrobe, Ice Wizzrobe and Electric Wizzrobe are fairly common and can be found near ruins and towers through the Hyrule. The Meteor Wizzrobe, Blizzrobe and Thunder Wizzrobe all have multiple ways of attacking Link, using their stuffs to summon keys or choo-choos or the same kind of changes in the weather that will affect Link. They're pretty hard to find and usually located in some far distant areas. Molduga can only be found in the Breath of the Wild Gerudo Desert. Molduga are Overlord bosses in Legends of Zelda Breath of the Wild that can only be found in the Gerudo Desert. Link does have the option to fight Molduga while shield surfing with a sand seal. However, horses are not able to be in the desert unless Breath of the Wild players glitches the horses there. The giant sand monsters are very sensitive to sound and definitely a challenge to fight. There are only 4 locations in the Gerudo Desert where Molduga can be found. It's the Taruma Dunes, South Oasis, North Dragon Exile, and Arbiter's Grounds. The next one is a certain type of Guardians which are very rare in the Breath of the Wild. While Decayed Guardians and Guardian Stalkers can be found throughout Hyrule, there are certain types of Guardians that can only be found in the specific locations. Guardian Turrets, which are immobile, can only be found at Hyrule Castle, in the Trial of the Sword, and in the Final Trial. Sentries, on the other hand, can only be found on the Death Mountains, specifically during the Divine Beast 1 Rudania main quest, which some consider the worst Divine Beast in the Breath of the Wild. Also, some enemies are impossible to find unless you have Breath of the Wild DLC. There are a few other enemies whose rarity comes from the fact that they are only available in the DLC for The Legends of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Along with the golden enemies, the Sky Octorok can also only be found in a Master Mode, which is from the Master Trials DLC. Sky Octorok can appear anywhere in Hyrule, cannot actively harm Link, and can easily be taken down with one arrow. They are usually found in groups of 3 or 4 carrying a plank with the enemies or treasure chests, and are alerted to Link presence by Link whistling or by a bokoblin blowing a horn. The Champion's Ballad for Breath of the Wild added the Master Cycle and new enemies only found in this DLC. This includes the Igneo Talus Titan found in the Lake Darman and Moldukin found in the Gerudo Desert. Both are incredibly difficult Overlord bosses that Link must take on the 4 different trials. There is also one dungeon boss who's only available in this DLC, Monk Mas Koshia, who can be found in the final trial. If the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild players want more of a challenge when they play in the game, Master Mode from the Master Trials DLC is definitely a good fit. Master Mode in the Breath of the Wild introduced players the stronger enemy types known as the golden enemies. The following type of enemies can come in the golden color: Bokoblins, Moblins, Lizalfos, and Linels. Players should always be on the lookout when exploring Hyrule, otherwise Breath of the Wild players will learn to watch for enemies the hard way, by dying in the battle. Tell me which of these rarest enemies you've seen and which is your favorite.